Hey guys, what's up? Stock Retail coming back to you on this happy Sunday. Hope it's a good Sunday for you. Here in Oregon, it's one of my favorite seasons. Cools down, but we still get a lot of sunshine, and it's just kind of a beautiful, crisp fall day here. The leaves have turned colors. Both my kids are kind of working at a farm during this season, and so we went and visited them yesterday. Good weekend. Hope it's a good weekend for you. And if fall is a nice season, well, it's a nice season for movies too. So I wanted to take a look at, as we've kind of rounded past Q3, we've moved into Q4. Let's take a look at what I think the box office might be for the quarter, so I'll give you a box office forecast. I'll give you an AMC earnings forecast. Kind of talk about what's going on, and we'll do a little bit of anti-FUD. You know, I like to kill FUD and kind of help share the thesis, so you can share that with your friends and family as well, and help some people see through a lot of the fake news. So let's just dive into what's going on. Hope it's a good Sunday for you guys too. So first off, let's just take a look at the big movies. This will just be kind of my view of like the top 10 for the quarter. You may disagree. Maybe you've got one or two that you feel should have snuck in here, but I'll just kind of show you. And frankly, this is just to get excited about what's coming. So we've got Moana 2, which, you know, the past few large franchises where Disney did a sequel, if you think about like Incredibles 2, Frozen 2, Inside Out 2, these have been really, really big movies, and that's an understatement. So I'll just tell you too, as we get into the forecast, I'm a little more unsure this quarter than most. Although, you know, there'll probably be a mix of upside and downside, and that kind of washes out and makes my forecast fairly accurate usually. But, you know, this would be one movie where I think I've gone big in my forecast. But, I mean, sometimes what is big? You know, with Inside Out 2, a lot of us went big, and then it still blew that out of the water. So this could be really big, would be exciting, and just fun for my family, and I'm sure some of your families to go see. Smile 2 is out. That was a big surprise last year. Did really, really well, kind of snuck up on everybody. Would be cool to see the franchise just grow. You know, some of you are more into Moana, some of you are more into Smile, so there's some movies for everybody this quarter. You know, look, I know we've got the numbers for Joker this weekend. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, how it's opening up in a minute. Obviously not doing as well as maybe some of us would have hoped, but it's still a big movie. It's still a $40 million opening weekend, and that kind of tells us about how big that movie's going to be for the quarter. So I'll talk about that in a minute, but still one of the top 10 movies of the quarter. Gladiator 2, holy cow, I'm crazy excited about that one. That, for me, is some memories from back in the day. I've watched the first movie so many times. I've shown my older kids. I used to watch it with my buddies. Very, very excited for the second movie here. And feeling very hopeful, too, you know, that could be a real big movie and a lot of fun to watch in the holiday season. Kraven the Hunter, I'm not suggesting that's anywhere near as big as some of the rest of these, but it's still in my top 10. You know, that's been a little hit and miss. Let's be real, you know, so we had like Madam Web, as Sony has tried to basically expand the Spider-Verse, let's call it, you know, because they've got the rights to everything Spider-Man pretty much. So they've tried to kind of expand that universe, and it's been a little hit and miss, but, you know, even what we call a miss, you know, Madam Web was still a decent-sized movie overall, even if it wasn't as big as perhaps hoped for. And so I see the same thing coming with Kraven. I think it'll be bigger than Madam Web personally, but also still makes my top 10 for the quarter. So just exciting to see some more options for people, especially comic book fans. Now, reversing that, Sonic 3, good Lord, that one's going to be big. First off, it's just pretty clear that there's a lot of buzz and excitement over that movie. It's doing very well in terms of its anticipation and its buzz. The second movie did really well. It was well over 200 million globally. I think this one is far, far bigger than even that, because the franchise has really taken off. You know, Paramount even ended up making like a Knuckles show. So there's just a lot of focus on this as a franchise. And then if you didn't know, there's a new video game that is kind of just coming out here. I want to say October 11th. I may have gotten that wrong. I posted about it on X, and I've already forgotten the date. So Generations is coming out, which, you know, if you have sort of cross marketing in a way, a video game coming out and the movie coming out. So I think Sonic 3 is just going to be really, really big. The industry has high hopes for that one if you kind of go out and look at people's forecasts and all that. So that's going to be pretty cool. I'm personally very excited about getting kind of expanding the Middle Earthiverse, I'll call it. Interesting. It's been a tiny bit controversial among just, let's say, nerd level controversial, and I'll put myself in the nerd bucket on Lord of the Rings and all things Tolkien. Um, I'm very excited about things like Rings of Power, War of the Rohirrim, and I honestly think that they could expand the universe of Middle Earth, and a lot of fans like me would be kind of show up for that. There are some fans who are saying, no, I don't love the idea. Stay, very purist to Tolkien. I can kind of understand that, but for me, it's like, hey, if you got good stories, Tolkien created a whole world. There's a lot more stories in that world to explore. So I am very excited about this movie. It's actually one of the first videos I made 2 years ago when I heard this movie was going to be made. I kind of jumped on and was very excited. So I think this one will be big, regardless of whether it's controversial among sort of the nerd fandom or not. It's going to have a sizable audience. It's going to be a good movie. Venom is looking like it's going to do really well, especially for the franchise. Maybe kind of the biggest one yet in terms of the franchise. There's the projections I see for opening weekend are anywhere from 80 to 120 million dollars just for opening weekend, and I'm talking domestic box there. And then we just kind of go from there. So that movie is picking up steam. It's gonna, I think, shift our focus here pretty soon from maybe Joker underperforming to something doing very well. So that's coming. Look forward to that. Wicked obviously has a huge fan base in terms of the Broadway play and all of that. And now we get what looks to me like a really well done movie. The visuals look good. It just feels like the production quality looks really good. So, and by the way, if you didn't notice, that used to be scheduled for kind of end of December, but was going to be up against Moana and Mufasa and a couple other things. And so I think the studio said, hey, let's pull that back. And you can see it's actually November 22nd now, which, by the way, is a win for us because then instead of just a couple weeks of revenue this quarter, we get it gets to breathe for quite some time. And I think it's coming out a week before Moana now. And so it kind of, again, has its own room to breathe and kind of have a little bit of its own run. So I'm pretty excited about that one. And then, the other thing you can kind of notice from this quarter, and I'm not even putting a couple, like there's a couple Christmas movies and some things coming out. I think it's a pretty family-friendly quarter. And when there are family-friendly movies, people, really show up. And those tend to have the strongest legs. So I'm also excited about that. And then, of course, how could I finish this slide without Mufasa? I am super excited about that movie, kind of backstory. We get an origin story from Mufasa. And Lion King historically has been a very, very large franchise. Look at the global numbers on that. I've told you guys you can go to a website called Box Office Mojo. Just look up a couple of the old Lion King movies and just see how big those have been. And then you'll get real excited about this one. Keep in mind as I move in this video today to starting to share some numbers, I also have shared with you guys in the past when I forecast, I'm not just forecasting the movie itself, I'm forecasting how much of the movie is in this quarter. So Mufasa comes out, basically Christmas. I want to say December 20th. I'd have to go back and look again. That just means, we only get kind of a week and a half in this quarter. So there's going to be a lot of revenue in the next quarter. It's going to be a huge movie regardless, so that helps us for sure. But timing matters when I'm giving you a specific quarter forecast. So keep that in mind too on a couple of these. Sonic as well kind of comes out at the end of December there. And War of the Rohirrim also is, I think, Christmas Day maybe for that one. No, I take that back. War of the Rohirrim is a little earlier. But anyway, there's a few of these movies that come out kind of at the end of December. And so you've got to factor that in terms of, how much revenue is in the quarter. But just some big, big movies for the quarter. Very, very excited. Lots to look forward to. So I'll just give you the bottom line on the box office right up front. I like to freeze my forecast so that I can kind of check on myself, how accurate am I being. If I move the goalposts all quarter, then it's really easy to just sort of pretend to you guys that I got something right. So I freeze it and I look at my original forecast. And so already you can see, I'm just showing you, before this video, I've had to change my number. So I had almost 2.5 billion for the quarter. But Joker, based on the way it has opened up, let's hope that perhaps, they went more artistic. They made it kind of more musical. I'll be honest, the audience reaction has not been great. You can see both on sort of a Rotten Tomatoes audience score and there's kind of a Cine score that I track, has not gotten good grades. So a lot of times from opening weekend and the audience reaction, you can already kind of forecast out. You basically just take a percentage of drop each week, and you can kind of figure out how big a movie is going to be. So I've already done that for Joker, and you can see I had to take out over $100 million on my forecast on Joker. I had hoped it was going to be as big as the last one. We're just not going to see that, and that's okay, because let's go back. Remember all these, and then all the movies I'm not even showing you. Some of you might think, hey, how come you didn't show me some of the horror movies, some of the family movies? There's a couple of kind of nice, I'll call them like a rom-dram, so not a rom-com, but like there's a Tom Hanks movie. There's a couple other movies that I think are going to do fairly well and may sneak into the top 10 even. And so there's a lot of movies I'm not showing you. So that's this bottom line here that I'm saying, hey, there's going to be a lot of upside and downside surprises. This happens every quarter. It's not bothering me. I don't want you guys to get nervous. But so you can see, I've already dropped my number for now to about $2.33 billion. But that's still a great quarter for us. And we're going to go through, okay, what does that mean to AMC's earnings? But as I go through all this, so then know that the earnings numbers I'm going to show you are based on this $2.35 billion domestic box office. I think I've shared with you guys, actually I know I have, just if you're new to me, maybe you haven't heard me say, I use the domestic box office, but I extrapolate out and figure out AMC's global revenue. So when I talk to you about earnings, I'm talking about the whole globe for AMC. And so now you just think, all right, either I think he's too high or too low on the box office, and anything I share with you the rest of this video, you can kind of just up or down against that in your mind, okay? So on that $2.33 billion domestic box office, before I get into the earnings, I want to talk a little bit about something specific called goodwill impairment. I have a whole video on impairment. You can go find that, so I'm not going to go deep. I'll just do this one slide here. Reminder, that is a non-cash expense. I think that's going to be really important because I'm going to highlight for you in this video sort of what our earnings would be without that impairment and with it. So I'm going to give you what is going to get reported to Wall Street, but I want you to remember that included in there is this non-cash expense. And so you can see in recent history, every fourth quarter, basically, AMC has had this goodwill impairment. You can see it climbed a bit. I think this had to do a lot with two things. One was just the, let's call it kind of the COVID era box office, effectively meant that AMC's assets, AMC's properties and projectors and things like that, and theaters and all the assets that AMC owned were generating less cash. So you have this thing called goodwill impairment when an asset isn't generating the cash that you kind of paid to purchase it for. And then on top of that, and now this is pure speculation, I think when we sold off a lot of properties and divested of some properties, that we had to write off, like if you bought it for more than you sold it, you've got to kind of factor in the loss from that. And I think that maybe they're sort of rolling that out on some kind of schedule in impairment. Now that last point I made up, I could be wrong. The accountants who follow me can sort of fact check that, because I'm not an accountant. I just know a couple things about accounting. So, but you can see then that the impairment has been going down from year to year. So first it took a jump and then it's been going down. So I've got a couple of question marks next to this. So you'll need to know, as I tell you the bottom line number, it includes, I'm forecasting $77 million for goodwill impairment. That again, I want to tell you is a non-cash expense. I don't want you to worry about that expense. It's non-cash. It will not impact our cash flows. But it does impact the bottom line earnings, and so I've accounted for that. I believe it's going to continue to decline until we sort of move towards zero over the next couple of years. And I just don't know the schedule of how fast that decline in impairment happens. That's why the question mark's here. I could be wrong on this number. So just want you to know that is included here. All right, so what are the big drivers of earnings? First off, let's remind ourselves, Adam has said a couple times, has kind of hinted at and sometimes sort of explicitly said he believes we'll have a couple of concerts here, perhaps in the end of the year. Well, we're in the end of the year. We're in Q4. So, I don't know for sure if that's still happening. I have not really forecast much in the way of numbers in this earnings forecast. You can see I'm saying I've got a low forecast right now. This could be a wild card. When we had Taylor Swift, she had a huge impact on Q4 last year, and you're going to see that here in a minute. In a way, she kind of saved our bacon in the quarter. On the other hand, when we had Usher, right, that didn't seem that big. We haven't really heard the numbers from that, but I don't think it was necessarily that big. It added, that's good. I'm really pleased that we're doing that. So let's see if we get any, how many we get, and how big they are this quarter. That could be a wild card, I'm just saying, that could really change my numbers, and I think there'd be upside against my numbers to that. But let's see. On merchandising, what I'm going to show you here in my bottom line number, I think I'm still fairly conservative on merchandising, merchandise sales. You know, if I go back to those, let's even just do it. So if you think about some of these movies and some of the others you know that are coming out, I think there's a real opportunity, especially in the kind of family and comic movies. There's a real opportunity on merch. And so perhaps I've been too conservative this quarter. I've just sort of forecast at recent trends. And Adam has told us over time that merch has been growing. And then, you know, remind yourself, it's not just merch for the specific movies, but I think we've been growing our presence online in terms of AMC's sort of online shop selling other merchandise as well. That's not always just related to a current movie. Like I know we're selling some Halloween costumes this year on the website. So that's increased earnings. That's great. So I'm just letting you know that could be upside to my forecast. Popcorn and candy expansion, you know, how much are we growing our market share now that we're in 8,000 points of distribution on popcorn? Will we ever see candy move to retail? Also, we know we had some out of stock issues last quarter with candy, so could we see some increases in sales there? And when I say candy, I think most of you know I'm specifically referring to AMC's own branded candy, our vertical line of candy, in-house brand. So we've sold candy always, but that's adding to our revenues now that we're selling our own, kind of keeping more profits. So that's probably another area that could be some upside. I have to forecast a number there that's still a wild guess because we've never seen those numbers reported separately. I continue to hope at some point Adam and team will decide that, say, popcorn's grown big enough, it gets its own sort of reporting line. It's kind of called management accounting or management reporting. You know, I trust them. If it's not time to give us that number, then that's okay. But until we get the number, I've got to guess at it. So we'll see. But, you know, once upon a time, he said there's a day a few years out, but where that, you know, popcorn alone may reach sort of a 9-digit business, you know, $100 million business in revenues. I don't worry, I've got us nowhere near that. So if anything, we can beat the numbers I'm giving you, but let's see. I think a big wild card on the earnings drivers is just how much market share are we gaining back in Europe, in particular in the UK. You might have heard my Q3 earnings forecast. Now that Q3 is done, go check that out if you want. That'll give you a little more detail on all these drivers and a few others. And you might have heard that Adam had said there is a competitor in the UK who's been sort of selling tickets at such a steep discount that they're basically running a loss to get market share, to get people into their doors. And that cannot go on forever. And at some point, they'll have to sort of raise their ticket prices. And when they do, does AMC take some market share back? Or is our team doing anything to get market share back? So that'd be a bit of a wild card. I've got to make assumptions about attendance. That ends up factoring into my numbers when I'm looking at admissions and food and beverage sales and all that. So that's another big driver. And then remember that the box office last year had significant strike impacts. And I'm going to show you a view back to 2022 also. I'm going to look at the last couple of years, 2022, 2023, and this year. So we can kind of look through Q4 and compare. It helps me show you where I'm forecasting. So last year we had a significant strike impact. I think the box office was only a little over 1.8 billion. So again, that's why I'm so glad we had Taylor Swift in that quarter. That saved AMC quite a bit, recovered some earnings we would have lost. And then in 2022, you know, we didn't have much of a box office yet. The industry hadn't really gone through much recovery yet. And then the other thing that is driving our earnings in this number is you're going to see that our expenses have been significantly lowered over time. Borrowing costs, depreciation and amortization, rent, even squeezing on operations expenses. Our expenses have really, really gone down over time, and I'm going to show you that as well, even a comparison to 2019. So at the bottom line, I'll just give you that, but let's do these comparisons. So in 2022, you can see we're about 1.8 at the box office, 1.8 billion, and our earnings was a negative 288, almost a loss of 300 million. That's got that big impairment number in it, remember that. Last year, the box office improved by about $100 million year over year. And you can see then our earnings improved by about $100 million. And that was the Taylor Swift concert. That's the biggest reason we had that much improvement. And then this year I'm forecasting 2.3, as I said, on the box office, and our earnings actually only being a minus 29. So it's really significant improvement. So you can see without impairment even, I'm telling you, we would have a positive quarter. And I wanted you to see that because, you know, my forecast for Q3 was very positive. Box office was a little bigger than this. I said we're making like $80 million at the bottom line. So I didn't want you to kind of wonder, well, how can we go from a positive 80 to a minus 30? Well, a big part of that is this impairment cost that you see every Q4, and that's why I kind of set that up. But if in a normal quarter, without the impairment costs, you can see we would be making almost $50 million this quarter. So that would be also, by the way, if you remember the Barbenheimer quarter, I've kind of hit that quite a few times in videos and posts on X. That Barbenheimer quarter, we had $12 million at the bottom line. And you can see that was on a much bigger box office. So what I'm showing you is this Q4 would be like 4 times better than last year's Q3 on a lower box office. Your management team has continued to improve our operations and improve our profitability, and we're moving the right direction. And a lot of that is, you know, it's 2 big things. If I just oversimplified, you know, these guys are doing a lot day in and day out, but if I oversimplified it, the top 2 things in my mind, they've been squeezing expenses. You know, if you lower your expenses, you keep more in your pocket, so your earnings go up. And they've been adding these other revenue lines. Popcorn, candy, distribution is outside of the box office. And so our earnings has improved far faster than the box office. And that's actually something that I've been telling you. So we're proving the thesis. Go back and watch the Q3 forecast, and you're going to see more in this, that the thesis keeps being proved, that AMC is going to improve far faster than the box office. And so as the box office improves, AMC's earnings are going to radically improve. And so you can see right here then, in 2 years, so in these 2 years from 2022 to 2024, now granted, I'm giving you a forecast, so you've got to decide if you trust my number or not. And I always say, no, trust me, bros. But so according to my forecast, in these 2 years, the box office is only up basically about a third, only up 32%. But AMC's earnings are up 90% in that same time, almost a $260 million improvement. And as impairment goes away, you'll see that improve even faster for Q4s in general. So radical improvement from AMC, going the right way. And we know that, you know, if you look forward to Q4 of 2025, we know we're getting even bigger. So imagine where we are a year from now, continued to improve, very positive earnings at that point, making a whole lot of money. And you can just see that. So I've shown you this before. I had done, if you're newer to AMC or newer to my channel, you go through, you'll see I have a fundamentals playlist, and look for one in particular that's probably the most recent one about kind of AMC's valuation or something like that. Maybe it says something about breaking the shorts thesis. And I went through a lot of details, every line. Like I'll show you how we're doing on rent, how we're doing on ticket price per customer, how we're doing on the, let's say, food and beverage sales. And I show you just all the different things that go into our earnings. And one of the things that you can then see is year by year what our improvement has been. And reminder then that, so I want to show you something. So I've got from since 2019, this skips 2020 because that's obviously COVID. So obviously we had the lockdowns, we had all kinds of problems. Hollywood just stopped, froze, and we had a really negative year in 2021 that you can see is just off the charts down here. 2022 then, we still almost lost $1 billion at the bottom line. Now remember, a lot of that is non-cash expenses. Last year, you can't quite see it, but we're still kind of down at losing $400 million. That, by the way, is something I talked about too, that shorts like to point you back this direction. But this year, I've got us only, now half the year is a forecast, losing $144 million. And then next year, making a whole lot of money. And remember that cash is even higher than that. But here's what's interesting. Check this out. Look at 2019 and look at 2024 according to my forecast. Half the year is actuals, half the year is my forecast. In terms of the box office, 3 out of the 4 quarters are actuals in this forecast. But you can see we've got basically the same number from 2019 to now. Well, that's kind of interesting. That catches my eye. So let's take a look at something. Let's just zoom in on that. So if you look at 2019, look at these numbers on the bottom here. 2019 was almost $11.5 billion at the domestic box office. 2024 in my forecasts, so 3 of the quarters are actualized in terms of the box office. So this is pretty baked. I've told you my forecast for Q4 at the box office, so you can go ahead and plus or minus where you think you disagree with me. But I've got us at about $8.5 billion at the box office. That is you know, significantly lower, almost $3 billion lower at the box office, $2.8 billion lower box office, and yet we're hitting the same earnings. Just really think about that for a minute and say that out loud. And we're going to kind of come back to saying some things out loud. On a box office that is down almost $3 billion just at the domestic box office, now expand that to globally what that means. Your management team has shifted this company to the point where it could make the same bottom line earnings. What do you think happens as the box office improves? What would happen if we got back to an $11 billion box office? And we don't even need to, and that's what I've said, and that's what Adam has said. We're already on a much, much lower box office achieving the same earnings, if I'm anywhere close in my forecast. So that's the big if that you've got to take from this. But regardless, even if I'm off a ways, you know that it's just clear directionally that on a lower box office, we now make more money than we used to. And when the box office recovers, as it has been, you know, we're getting past the strike. Look at the back half of 2024 versus the front half. It's two entirely different box offices. So now just roll forward and think about 2025. And then all these stock analysts who are pointing you towards AMC's losses are going to look very, very stupid very, very soon. And so that's why I continue to want you to see what's actually happening versus what they show you and what they say. Okay, let's kind of continue this thought. Let's pull on this string for a minute. So I just was thinking through, so if in that time from 2022 until now, our earnings have improved 93%. I think it's actually, I think that number's wrong. I think I had updated this as I was looking at it. 90%. So it's this number. So just keep that in mind. Our earnings have improved 90%. So apologies, guys. I had updated a number because I was kind of still tweaking the forecast right up until I wanted to show you guys this, just to make sure I try to get it as right as I can. So this number is actually 90%. We've improved our earnings 90%. And yet our market cap in that time has gone from, I think it was like 6.2 billion down to the 1.6 that you see. Just Google AMC market cap chart. So if market cap is just a function of take all the shares of a company, multiply them by their price, and that's what sort of Wall Street, let's say, is saying a company's worth. In 2022, when we were, 90% less earnings than we're going to have this quarter, Q4 versus Q4, we were at like 6.2 billion market cap. AMC would have to go up 4 times to be at that market cap. So you ask me, and so here's what I want you to really see. Look at this steep drop, right? The reverse split, the conversion. One of the things that I continue to hammer home for myself and for others so that we cannot be gaslighted, and you can just see sort of market cap stayed roughly flat over all this time, a couple of years there. This is, well, for a year and a half. Shorts will point to dilution and things like that. But the reason I'm showing you market cap is it's effectively the entire value of the whole company. So it doesn't matter if you have 1 share or 10 billion shares. It's still the value of the company, and that shouldn't change. And so as earnings increase, as earnings get better, as cash flows get better, in theory, your market cap should go up. So you ask yourself, what has happened in this year and a half that our earnings have improved 93%, and we're turning to the point where we're starting to have multiple profitable quarters, positive cash flow. Let's look at that. Market cap down 77%, while earnings are up. Again, that should say 90%. I don't think it takes a genius to figure out there is manipulation on this stock. And as I continue to show you the profits that are coming, that to me is what's going to break the back of all of this manipulation. So let's keep going. Just say all this out loud. In all that time, debt is down, rent is down, borrowing costs are down, revenue is up, we've added entire new revenue streams, the industry is recovering, and it's not even done recovering. I try to tell you guys, wait till 2026. When you start having Star Wars movies and Marvel is really in full swing, we haven't had new Avengers movies yet. What do you think happens when that comes? Cash flows have flipped positive. We're already there. The earnings potential is far higher than pre-pandemic. and yet our market cap is down. Do not let shorts tell you that this is because of dilution. Dilution does not reduce the value of the overall company. Neither does a reverse split. That's completely bogus. They're trying to focus you on that. That's bogus. So when we're making money, and it's already started, I should go back and look at the Q3 forecast. From here forward, we start looking a lot better, and we start being in these zones, they will not be able to hide it anymore. They're already not able to hide it. People like me are showing you what's really going on. And it's a little ridiculous, but you know how I feel. We will win. So let's go.